All right, we are going to go ahead and get started. So I'm going to pull up my screen and share it. Welcome. As we're going through this, we're going to be doing a demo, going through some slides. Feel free to ask questions, post them in the Q&A, and we will answer them, as we're able to throughout the call. So let me share my screen. You see this, John? We good?
Not yet. There we go.
All right. Go ahead. Take it away, John.
Awesome. Well, welcome everybody. In terms of quick agenda here, we're going to go ahead and kick things off with a quick round of intros. Jake's going to take you through an introduction to CPM. So for those of you that are not familiar, he's going to give you a little bit of background on what CPM and how it's a lot of organizations are leveraging it to streamline a lot of their FP&A core processes. We're also going to talk a little bit about the AI functionality within FP&A and CPM products like Abacum. We'll talk about some proof points. Then we're going to jump into why Abacum and NetSuite are the perfect match. So being able to go ahead and harness all that information, bring it into Abacum for all of your planning, reporting, and dashboarding purposes. And then we'll talk through the integration as well. And we'll leave some time for questions. But as Jake had mentioned, do not hesitate to go ahead and enter questions into the chat. In terms of outcomes, we really want you to get a good understanding of what CPM is and how it could streamline some of your core FP&A processes. We're going to talk about, once again, sort of the AI tools that lend itself to speeding up core processes, being able to go ahead and generate narratives, how it can actually be leveraged to do predictive forecasting as well. And then once again, line of sight and how do we connect with Abacum with NetSuite here. So just a quick round of intros. On my side, I'm John Sabek. I'm a partner account manager here at Abacum. Been in the CPM space for going on close to 10 years now. By trade, I am a CPA, so very familiar with budgeting, forecasting, reporting, consolidations, aggregation systems, and all the pains and headaches that coincide with that. Jake?
Yeah, thank you, John. So, hi, everyone. My name is Jake Lunny. I work at E78. So, I'm a managing director in the finance technology practice at E78. So, what that means is I oversee all of our partnerships with firms like Abacum. We are a partner of Abacum. So, we do implementations, we support, the demoing process, optimizing the platform, etc. I myself come from FP&A. So there are probably several folks on the call who come from FP&A, maybe some others in accounting. I come from the world of FP&A. I come from the world of, building models in Excel, doing forecasting in Excel, doing presentations in PowerPoint, and understand the manual world that is that. Which is why that I pivoted a bit and started working with platforms like Abacum. We'll show you here in just a moment what the platform can do and how it can help you to augment, streamline, speed up, make more efficient all of these processes that historically have been highly manual when trying to do so in Excel. So we have this agenda over here. We're going to jump into this right here, and I'm going to give you a quick overview of just, for those of you who've never even heard or seen an EPM or CPM before, kind of what it's, meant to do and how it's different from the world of Excel. Before we do that, though, we do have a two-question poll just to get a sense of everyone's familiarity with platforms like Abacum. So you should see that pop up in just a moment here, and you can answer that poll. So maybe we only have one question actually. So the question is going to be how familiar are you with CPM and EPMs overall? So there's three choices really. So one is are you, not familiar, never heard of any kind of EPM or CPM before? You've only used Excel or Google Sheets. Number two is you're familiar, but you've never used an EPM or CPM. You know what they are, but you've never used one. And number three is you're familiar and you have used one before. So if everyone could please fill that out, I'll give everyone a second, and then I'll look at the results.
What do you think is going to take this one, Jake? Even split?
Could be it's split between not familiar and familiar. At least it was the last time.
Right
But
on.
maybe a lot of people are familiar and have used one and want to join and just see something new.
Yeah, for
But
sure.
I'm gonna bet about a 50-50 split between the first two. All right, I'm not able to see the results, so I think if we have everything in, we can go ahead and close the poll. All right. I don't know if people can see. Can you see it, John? Can you see it on the
Yep.
screen, the results?
Yeah.
Okay, everyone can see
Looks
the
like
results. Okay.
yeah.
So it's actually but not quite what I thought. So only a couple people, two are not familiar at all. About half are familiar and have never used, and then the other remaining half-ish are familiar and have used. So are probably just here to see something new. So we have a kind of a mix here, right? So for those who are familiar, these slides may not be as informative, but for those who are not familiar, hopefully they are. But maybe they are. Maybe there's certain things you'll see in these slides really quickly that will show you some of the ways in which a CPM is meant to be used. And some of you on this call have probably even seen these slides before. So let me just set the stage a little bit, right, before we jump in and show you all the bells and whistles of the tool itself. So what is the FP&A of what I like to call yesterday, the world that probably a lot of you are familiar with, the world that I'm familiar with, look like, right? We have our source systems. These could be things like NetSuite, of course. Maybe probably while you're here, you have NetSuite. Maybe an HRIS like ADP, maybe a CRM like Salesforce, maybe a data warehouse, maybe an EMR, excuse me. Any kind of a system that houses key data that you may use for any sort of financial or operational reporting and forecasting. In a typical world, right, when you're not using a CPM or EPM and you're using Excel, an FP&A team, humans, have to go into each of these systems and manually extract data and pull data from each of them, right? They have to pull reports from NetSuite, from HRIS, from the CRM. And if they want to potentially stitch these reports together, right, and actually append the data sets and bring data from Salesforce and connect it with data in NetSuite, it's a highly manual process, right? There's typically some aspect of data cleansing, data transformation, data mapping, things like that, right? They then likely have to load in, let's just say the actuals out of NetSuite, the transaction or the GL detailed dump into an Excel-based financial model, right? Actualizing that model, right, and building a reforecast inside of Excel. And then if they want to then distribute, say, results, budget versus actual results, or collaborate, other reforecast, build a reforecast with folks around the company who own budgets or have inputs into a budgeting a process, they likely then have to take subsets and slices of this larger financial model and distribute these things out, right, manually. God forbid they accidentally send, the headcount or the salaries of the head of marketing to the head of IT, and one finds out that one makes more money than the other, things like that, right? It's a very error prone and can be somewhat risky and highly manual process. And then if those folks, these budget owners or sales leaders, want to then potentially provide new information back to the FP&A team, like they want to hire a new head or they want to engage with a new vendor, they might load that into their Excel file, ship it back to the FP&A team, who then has to manually load all this information back into the master Excel file, right? Then there may be, and to be clear, this slide is meant to make your head hurt a little bit intentionally, and hopefully this resonates with some of you all. If we want to then publish the results in a nice, clean reporting package in PowerPoint, we're having to probably manually publish scorecards and results from the Excel model into the PowerPoint deck. We may then be distributing that PowerPoint deck back out to all of those same people that we already collaborated with, or some subset of those people that we've already collaborated with, right? Each of these icons represents an individual Excel file, right? So over the months and the years of doing this, the volume of Excel files can compound into dozens, if not hundreds of different versions with crazy names like V3, B, best case, worst case, Jake's version, do not delete, things like that. Very hard to remember what assumptions were made in each, who changed what where, right? Tracking the audit trail of the buttons, or the, excuse me, the cells and the formulas of how things changed inside of Excel can be very, very difficult, right? It can be very challenging to remember what we presented to the board, what the final version of the budget was, all of these kind of things, right? I'm sure these are all things that we've all encountered. We call this Excel hell, right? So how is something like Abacum meant to solve this situation, right? So let's go through the same kind of thing. So we have our same source systems, right? We have a NetSuite, an HRIS, a CRM, but instead of having to manually extract data from each of these systems each month, we create automated integrations to Abacum, to our web-based ecosystem, to the platform itself, which is meant to, again, replace largely the Excel-based kind of financial model. So data is piping over automatically on a predetermined schedule. Also, if there needs to be relationships or some kind of a mapping infrastructure set up between, say, the CRM and NetSuite itself, all of that can be built, with logic built either by, a human like us, users, or some of the AI features, which again, we'll show you later on. But the idea, right, is that you're not having to manually pull data, clean data, delete columns, add rows, whatever it may be, change names to get the data into the system. It's a seamless automated process. Then, instead of having, if we want to distribute results, right, or collaborate with other folks across the company to get updates to the forecast or the budget, rather than having to ship out and email all these Excel files, right, we're actually giving those folks access to the slice of the business that they should be able to see, right? So the marketing department for the marketing leader, the sales department for the sales leader, the IT department for the IT leader. They can see KPIs and graphs and charts and results, budget versus actual reporting that's relevant to them, and then they can also potentially even collaborate and add things to a budget version or some kind of a version that you, as the administrator on the finance team, are tightly controlling, right? So, the idea is that updates to the reforecast or to the budget are automatically syncing back into the mothership, if you will, rather than having to be shipped, emailed back and then manually loaded back into a master Excel file, right? We then have, nice, clean dashboarding capabilities, right, for both operational and financial KPI reporting and results reporting. We have more detailed, BVA, budget versus actual reporting, where we can actually drill into the transactions underneath the hood and write and see commentary within the tool itself. Again, completely avoiding Excel and PowerPoint, things like that. But we do have add-ins that are automated and bidirectional, meaning we can pull data down into Excel and PowerPoint, and we can also push it back up. We also have the same thing for Google Suite, so Google Sheets and Google Slides, Google Presentation as well. So we can, pull data down into those environments. There's still going to likely be a place for Excel, right? There always is some kind of ad hoc things that pop up, but we can ultimately push data back into Abacum very seamlessly. And all of this is managed in a single instance of Abacum as opposed to a bunch of disparate, disconnected Excel files, right? So it's a lot more centralized and interactive and collaborative because we can give folks access to it, but we don't have to send out a bunch of Excel spreadsheets that can be very difficult to manage and track. And the best part is all of this sits on AI capabilities, which we'll show you here shortly in the demo. So how, hopefully those two slides resonated at least with some folks on here, right? Of what the world that they may be in now of Excel, or potentially having an EPM that maybe isn't fully implemented, still feels like where you're in that kind of hybrid space where you have maybe half, an EPM implemented, something like that. But one of the distinguishing features, truly, of Abacum is its AI features. Now, look, I know that AI is the biggest buzzword of the day. Everybody's talking about AI. Everybody's talking about, natural language, ChatGPT-like functionality. And it's, the devil's always in the details of how well it works. And look, we're here to talk about Abacum, of course. And so you're probably thinking he's going to say that's unique, compared to others. We'll show you here in a moment, but it truly is. So I, don't work at Abacum. I come from a partner of Abacum's, right? But we have other partnerships as well with other EPMs. And I've seen and used a lot of other EPMs and BI platforms. The AI features in Abacum are truly much more advanced from what I've seen in terms of its ability to use natural language to actually write formulas, as opposed to, Excel-based syntax or more complex syntax. Using AI to actually write commentary and dig into variances. Again, you'll see all this in a moment, but there are some really, truly powerful AI features that make the FP&A process much faster, much more streamlined. Look, again, I come from FP&A, right? I remember the days of just pulling data down from the ERP, only from the accounting system. But now a lot of us are pulling data from data warehouses, from CRMs, from HRISs, from ERPs, right? And we're having to append and stitch together all of this different data from all of these different systems. It's extremely hard to do in an environment in which you're not using any sort of AI, any sort of automation, right? And so the capabilities you're going to see here shortly really, really, truly speed up that whole process of bringing data together, creating relationships across systems, right? And really speeding up the whole process. Some of the features specifically that you're going to see here again shortly are, start with the top left. My favorite one is the writing of commentary, right? I mean, again, All of us are probably very familiar with how long it takes to drill into what was budgeted versus what actually occurred. Look at the vendor names, make sure the vendor names are actually the same vendor, right? Did we spell something wrong? Looking at that information under the hood and writing the full story of what we expected to happen versus what actually happened, an enormously important part of FP&A, right? And telling leaders what actually occurred versus what we expected to occur. Doing all of that is an enormously cumbersome and manual process, but there's AI and Abacum that can help to actually drill in to the underlying data and actually literally write the commentary and create reporting for you. It's pretty incredible. Things like predictive forecasting, right, where we're looking at different historical data, extrapolating that data using regression analysis to build some sort of of an expected trend and a forecast, right? Obviously, we can overlay our own assumptions into those things, but having at least like the 80% of it done via the machine learning capabilities in Abacum is hugely powerful. Anomaly detection, right? So when folks are going in and building budgets, flagging certain numbers that maybe don't fit with trends, either as a mistake or potentially as somebody getting a little too egregious and aggressive in what they want to put in, right? So having technology to do all of that stuff, all the things that we in FP&A are familiar with taking a lot of time is hugely powerful, right? Um, so what are folks saying? How does this actually, when the rubber meets the road, what does this actually mean, right? So clients, this is some information from clients who've testified, right, of just faster budget cycles, right? Faster close cycles, faster reporting time. I mean, going from, 20 days of close plus reporting, plus, distribution of results down to say, 5 or 6 days is hugely impactful, right? Especially leaders. Leaders cannot make decisions when they're getting actuals 20, 25 days after things have actually occurred. So getting information into the system, getting nice stories and commentary around it, actually understanding what's happening, really, really, really sped up by this whole process, right? One-click reporting. I mean, I'm sure that's really, it sounds too good to be true to a lot of folks, but it really is. And again, you're going to see it here, right? Which is quickly refreshing reporting, as opposed to every single month having to manually drag over columns, export things out into a PowerPoint environment, something like that. Refreshing your reports, refreshing the variance commentary, again, immensely powerful. So I will stop talking now and I will turn it to my friend John to take us through the rest of the slides as well as the demo.
All right. Jake, if you could, there we go. Yeah, those are some great proof points, Jake. And as you mentioned, there's a number of different use cases. We have hundreds of customers across all different industries and verticals. We have customers in tech, healthcare, biotech, financial services firms, manufacturing, non-for-profit. And in terms of size, it really ranges. We have some customers that are in hyper growth mode. So they have 50 employees. And then on the other side of the spectrum, we have, a lot of customers that have a few hundred all the way up to a couple thousand. Our largest customer has 15,000 employees. And the reason really that I like to spike this out is it boils down to the complexity that normally comes with these types of organizations. They have a lot of entities, they have a lot of departments, they have a lot of dimensions to handle in their NetSuite instance. And now try translating that into a planning tool that needs to calculate all this information, which becomes very difficult. And I really think that's the big advantage of Abacum. We can accommodate unlimited dimensionality, really centralize those complex calculations, and pull in very large data sets. But the one thing that I really want to spike out is that it's not just financial information, as Jacob mentioned. It could be operational data. So pulling data from not only your NetSuite instance, but maybe your CRM, your payroll system, your EMR system, and centralizing all that within one location. Now, why do companies choose Abacum and NetSuite? And it really starts off with our native integration into NetSuite. It's one of the most common systems that we integrate to. When you set it up once, it's really the set it and forget it approach. So we'll end up hooking into your instance. We would go ahead and schedule the cadence of your data refresh. For some customers, that means overnight. Others, it's a couple times throughout the day. As you approach month end, you can actually go ahead and run it on demand as well in order to go ahead and bring in the changes since the previous refresh. And the way it works is we have the ability to retrieve transaction details, including custom fields, save searches, and reports. Some solutions on the market really struggle when it comes to replicating the balances, in which case it requires a lot of workarounds. And that's not the case with Abacum at the end of the day here. Next slide, Jake. And yeah, and the reason being is that we actually productize the integration, which allows it to boil down to really four simple steps. We don't require any sort of engagement with the IT group. Typically, what we'll go ahead and do is actually work with the NetSuite administrator. And we have basically a user interface that walks them really through these four steps here. So obtaining your organization's token, installing the Abacum bundle in NetSuite, creating and assigning API tokens, and then setting permissions to enable the dataset sync. I was actually talking to one of my colleagues last week, and the fastest we've actually integrated into NetSuite was sub 30 minutes, which is rather impressive because I know a lot of other vendors will actually go ahead and actually take in upwards of 40 hours an entire week. And, obviously there's the time and materials that are associated with it. So the integration being really one of the most expensive parts of some of these solutions in terms of getting them implemented. And then really what it boils down to, as Jacob mentioned, is, Abacum's really geared towards driving efficiencies within the office of the CFO. That all begins with setting up the integrations into your core systems, bringing that information into a central location to give you a holistic view of what's going on organizationally. In terms of collaboration and accountability, there's a ton of different ways to actually get different people within the organizations involved with core processes, such as month-end reporting, or even on the planning and forecasting side to provide inputs and comments. So you could go ahead, you could tag people in tasks. You could have comments. As soon as you go ahead and enter in a user, you can add them. It'll actually send them an email notification along with a Slack message. And at the end of the day, the tool is extremely flexible, which allows a lot of organizations to scale. So we actually go ahead and set up your model that contains your calculations, your business logics, and then allows you to actually go ahead and accommodate any changes that you want to go ahead and make down the road. So if you want to go ahead and build out, a CapEx model or a detailed revenue model, you could absolutely do so within Abacum with ease. And then, from a product standpoint, really, it's the top AI native solution geared towards the mid-market. In terms of the individuals that we tend to work with, if you think of personas, it's really people within the finance and accounting department. The tool is super easy to use, and that lends itself well to branching outside of those departments, in which case we actually have a lot of people on the operations side that tend to log in to Abacum and leverage it for planning, reporting, and tracking specific KPIs. Think of this as people on the sales side of the organization, people within the business, along with HR and controllers as well. And at the end of the day, it is a modeling solution. So a lot of our customers leverage it for different use cases, including revenue planning, headcount planning, budgeting, and forecasting on the OpEx side. And then, as Jacob mentioned, playing around with different levers and modeling out different scenarios, such as base case, best case, worst case. And then on the reporting side, once we have all your information, you can do all of your reporting directly within the solution as well. So think of this as your financial statements, so balance sheet P&L. Along with that, you can actually do, investor type of reporting directly within Abacum as well. All right. So let
I'll
me
share.
steal the controls, Jake.
Yeah.
And then if you could let me know if you could see your screen change, that'd be awesome.
There you go. Yeah. And I'll just say again, as I said earlier, as John is doing the demo, if you all have questions, feel free to pop them in the Q&A box as well, and I'll answer them as they come up. So please start, John. Go ahead.
Yeah, awesome. My main goal really for the next 20 minutes or so is really just to walk you through a day in the life of an Abacum user. First things first, as you're probably well aware, Abacum is a web-based solution. So in terms of gaining access as a user, you can actually leverage any of your favorite web browsers. So Chrome, Firefox, Internet Explorer, Safari, all pretty common ones. We do support single sign-on as well, which allows your end users to pass through their login credentials. Alternatively, they can actually log in utilizing a username and password as well. Okay. Now, when they log in, what they're essentially presented with is their own landing page. And here's an example. We call them spaces, and the best way to describe a space is that it's a blank canvas at the end of the day. So a lot of our customers would go ahead and create a space for dashboarding purposes, reporting, or planning, or even a combination of that as well. So in my example, once again, you could go ahead and configure these to whatever you want them to look like, but you could pull in information, surface it in the form of what we call KPI cards. So it's a great way to keep a close pulse on key metrics. Scrolling down a little bit, you can include what we call callouts to include, commentary or narratives. And then again, we have a number of different visuals that can be created as well in the form of charts and graphs as well. So a lot of our customers actually leverage the spaces section from a collaboration standpoint. So for example, you could go ahead and include tasks within a space, right? So for example, here's one where it's asking me to go ahead and update my month-end commentary. In addition to that, you can include comments, cell comments. So for example, I could go ahead and click on the comment, read it, and then I could go ahead and do what's asked of me. But as mentioned before, when you go ahead and at somebody, it's actually going to go ahead and kick off an email notification or a Slack notification that, they've been asked to go ahead and provide input. The spaces sections, just to provide a little bit more context here, are great for further analyzing your data. So for example, in my example here, we have our consolidated P&L. What's nice is, let's say we want to take a look at what's driving our favorability in this case. You can actually drill down. So the actual table is actually fully interactive. So you could drill down from your top line down to an entity, from an entity down to a product. And then from a product, you could go into a territory and all the way down to the customer level. So fully interactive. This really is capability that's nice. It's dynamic to allow you to go ahead and surface, very detailed information at the end of the day. In addition to that, if you're taking a look at a particular balance and you want to take a look at the underlying transactions, what's really powerful is that a user can actually come in, right click, select open transaction details. And this is where Abacum is going to go ahead and actually bring up each individual transaction that makes up that particular balance. So this is being fed in from your NetSuite instance. Once again, we pulled in all the specific fields, but it really allows you to get to that granularity of detail with a single click. Jake had painted a pretty good picture before where, a lot of times when you're analyzing data and you're doing it in Excel, you're having to extract a data set out of your ERP. You're having to go ahead and drop it into an Excel file, create a pivot table, or run, some type of calculation, VLOOKUP, in terms of being able to analyze that. So in this case, you could see it's rather quick to get to that level of detail without ever leaving the solution. Now, in terms of look and feel of these charts, they're totally up to you. So what's actually really neat, if we go over here to the builder icon, this is where we can actually come in and specify what we would want within the rows and columns. So if I go ahead and hit on this little cog, you notice that in terms of timeframes, I've pulled in our month to date, quarter to date, year to date. If we hit this little plus icon, let's say your organization wants to track, the last 12 months or the next 12 months, you could actually go ahead and make that selection, and Abacum will go ahead and drop it into this table. Below that are the versions that I've selected. So we have actuals, we have our forecast. You could create the variance to that as well. And then within the variable section, and just to provide some context, when we're talking about variables, it's essentially what we have within our rows. It's your accounts. I could come in, make a selection. So we have our entire P&L, but I could come in and get very specific. So for example, let's say I'm not too concerned about a complete P&L view. Maybe I just want to take a look at revenue. I could come in, make that selection. And once again, Abacum is going to go ahead and lay that data out for us accordingly. What's really nice is that if you want to go ahead and change it up, maybe you want to pull in your customer dimension. You could drop that into the page. Maybe you want to break it down by region as well. And as you notice, Abacum is extremely responsive, and I'll actually go ahead and lay out that selection that you've created on the fly here. So this is great for ad hoc reporting. Once again, if you want to come up with a specific view, if it's one that you like, obviously you can go ahead and save it. In addition to that, you can actually go ahead and turn it into a nice visualization. And as you can see, there's a number of different types of chart options that you could go ahead and utilize as well. So let's close back out here. In the event that you want to go ahead and drop in a chart or graph, what's really nice is that you don't need to know any sort of program coding or anything like that. You can actually just hit the / within the actual canvas itself, and you'll notice that there's a plethora of different options that now you have the ability to go ahead and include within that space. So tables, charts, KPI cards, You can include that call out section once again if you want to provide some commentary, descriptions, or if you want to go ahead and create lists, that all can be included as well. Scrolling down just a tad, just to provide a little bit more context and paint the picture here. You notice that you could draw up in audio and visual images. So this could be a link to a particular recording. And in addition to that, you can actually include board packages as well. So look and feel, I always stress is totally up to, the end users. If you ever want to share space, we make it extremely easy and intuitive. You could simply go to the three dots in the upper right-hand corner here, select share. If you want to print and download it, you can absolutely do so as well by selecting this print and print option there. Now, let's switch gears here a little bit. Let's talk a little bit about the input side of things for planning purposes. What I'm going to go ahead and do next is go back out to my spaces section here. And you'll notice that I've created a couple different ones. So obviously we're taking a look at our performance, but I've set one up for revenue planning, headcount planning, forecasting, along with cash planning as well. And if I go ahead and make a selection, I can actually go into my marketing space, for example. And the way this is rolled out for a lot of companies is they'll go ahead and create a separate space for each and every one of their departments or cost centers or budget owners. And in my example, what's nice is you could pull in information to provide them an idea of how things are tracking or trending. So in my example, here's our monthly review. We could take a look at actuals to forecast, right? In this case, we have January and February. We could do a comparison of actual to forecast, in which case we could see that we have some pressure or unfavorability. And then below that, you can actually provide your budget owner with some, directions or instructions on how to go ahead and update their forecast. So scrolling back down a little bit, you could get to the input section. And you could come in and get to any level of detail that you would like. So for organizations that want to plan down to the vendor level, you can absolutely do so. So here's an example of an input template. Based on the fact that we are tracking higher than what was budgeted, you may want to go ahead and remove some of these items. Maybe you want to have them allocated to a different region, for example. If you want to add in a new vendor, simply hit the little plus icon or add row option on the right-hand side here, and you'd come in and fill out the criteria that's associated with it. Keep in mind, if you're going to go ahead and request, additional spend, what we'll actually go ahead and do is send a notification to the finance team, who then could either come in and approve or reject the spend as appropriate. But super, super intuitive, super, super easy. At the end of the day, it's a great way to capture, respective inputs. The one thing that I want to point out here, part of the actual implementation is we would sit, Jake and team, our implementation partners, our in-house team, they take a look at your input templates. If it's something that everybody loves, obviously they could go ahead and reproduce them. But we also provide recommendations and suggestions of best practice as well. So in addition to having direct inputs into a schedule, you could go ahead and maybe create where it's driver based, where it may be based off of, the number of users, or a percentage of ARR. You could set up all these various types of driver based calculations as well that could feed your inputs into your templates as well. All right. And once again, then you could surface the data in a number of different tables and charts and graphs as well. So expenses obviously being a pretty big component. I'd also say, headcount is something that a lot of organizations like to focus on as well. It usually represents probably the biggest expense in a lot of cases. In this case, once again, similar to that of OpEx planning, you could go ahead and create a space for each and every department. Each and every hiring manager could come in. They could take a look at their current headcount. They could take a look at their new joiners, the people that ended up leaving. And then you could have these nice tables that could track, how they're tracking from an actual to budget standpoint as well. So they could come in, they could take a look at if there's favorability or unfavorability. You could include, once again, the directions in terms of how to go ahead and fill out a request. You can include a nice little short tutorial video. And then below that, you can actually get into the actual schedules as well. So you can come in, open it up, And this is where you'd be able to go ahead and provide requests for additional headcount. And really, the context here is that you'd have one area where you can actually add people, you can remove people, you can update any of their payroll related attributes. Keep in mind, as Jacob mentioned, we would hook into your payroll or your HR system, bring that information into Abacum here, create the schedule. In the event that you want to add a new employee, you could simply select insert row by right clicking. If you have somebody that's going to be moving departments, you can actually duplicate the row and then go ahead and alternate their criteria as well. But once again, one area, people come, they can add people, they can remove people, they could update any of their payroll related information, and then that could all then be forwarded on to the individual for approval, right? So I was at, say, the departmental level. In my example, this rolls up to the go-to market team, in which case we have customer success, marketing, and sales. If I am the approver, I could come into the schedule where now I can approve, reject as appropriate. So a great way, once again, to sort of put the accountability back into the hiring manager or people within the organization, involve them with the actual planning process in order to get them engaged. But yeah, at the end of the day, that's the beauty about being able to go ahead and tap into all these different source systems and bring that information into one central location. It really all begins with the integration capability here. So here's where we would go ahead and select your integration. As you can see, the beauty about Abacum is that not only can we go ahead and pull in information from, say, NetSuite, but we also have the ability to pull in information from your billing systems, your CRM systems, your data lakes, along with the HRS systems as well. Right, so here's our native integration into NetSuite. Just taking a look a little into the data sets real quick. If we go over to the viewer, this is essentially the fields that we are bringing in from your ERP system, right? What's nice is that you can actually do the transformations directly within Abacum now as well. So for example, if I go ahead and select the transformation button on the side here, this is where you have the ability to go ahead and, if you want to group data, for example, you could come in and group them. We also have what we call the AI classifier that Jake had talked about. This is great for ERPs that tend to drop, let's say, the vendor name in the memo or description field, and you want to go ahead and maybe be able to track, analyze, plan, but you want to set that up as a separate dimension. You can actually go ahead and create the dimension, have the AI classifier flag that, and then put it into that respective dimension that you've created here.
This is maybe a good a question that came in that's kind of relevant to what you're talking about now, John,
Yeah.
from Rishabh, which is thanks for the walkthrough. This is really helpful. Could you also show how the calculations are done on the back end or how the KPIs are built? In reality, the data isn't always as clean as we'd like it to be, so it'd be great to understand that part as well. So I think that ties in well to what you're showing now.
I was actually just about to go there. So this is what,
Yeah.
before we actually get into the calculations, but this is a great way to start cleansing that data. If you want to go ahead and create any sort of transformation, you could create those joins. You could go ahead and scrub the data before you actually go ahead and leverage it within your model for calculation purposes. So making our way up our menu options here, we could jump into the models component. And you can see for demo purposes, I've created a number of different types of models. We have P&L models, balance sheet models, cash flow, headcount. Typically, most customers will go ahead and create three models: their financial model for P&L, balance sheet, cash flow, a headcount model for personnel planning, and maybe a revenue model as well. But just clicking on the P&L model, this is essentially where we would set up your calculation logic. And what's really nice is that you can actually go ahead and create formulas for your different versions. So in the event that you want, say, your forecast or your budget values to be calculated differently than your actuals, you can actually go ahead and create separate logic to accommodate that. Now, what's nice from a formula standpoint is the fact that it is prescriptive. So when you're going to start creating these formulas, it actually provides you some guidance in terms of what to include within that particular formula. So my example for, gross profit, for example, it's, revenue minus cost of sales, a pretty easy one. Um, Yeah, and then, if we go ahead and click on another formula here, you could come in um, and either duplicate it, you could go ahead and copy it, you could go ahead and change it. We also have the ability to go ahead and leverage on AI forecasting as well. So, for example, if you want to go ahead and leverage the predictive functionality for a predictive account, what it'll actually go ahead and do is leverage the historical data, as Jacob mentioned, provide some sort of regression analysis, and basically go ahead and model out a new scenario for you. So you can actually go ahead and now store that, save it. You could go ahead and create another one, and then you can even compare and contrast the same two as well, or as many as that you want to create. So, for example, at the top here, you notice we have our different versions. You could go ahead and create a number of different versions, and then we have our scenarios. So this is where you could play around with different levers, model out a bull case, bear case, best case, and factor in various types of assumptions. All right. Yeah, and once again, we this is where we'd sit with the team. Jake would sit with you guys, talk a little bit about all of your different calculations, your balance sheet, P&L, cash flow. You could go ahead and create KPI type of calculations as well, where you're modeling out maybe cost per revenue, gross margin, revenue per square foot, cost of acquisition, all of those can actually be created. The best part, and Jake, you probably can attest to this, is that the calculations are centralized. So they no longer sit in a tab or a workbook that are susceptible to somebody coming in and overwriting or fat fingering. The craziest exercise is if you go into any spreadsheet tab and do a control F equals, you'll see how many calculations are in that spreadsheet. And even the most simplistic spreadsheet probably has thousands of calculations. So this is great to be able to go ahead and centralize that. It makes it extremely easy to go ahead and update because it trickles down across all of your templates and reports. And therefore you don't have to go ahead and, update each and every tab or workbook that you have.
Which is huge, as opposed to going tab by tab by tab by tab and dragging over the columns and having to do all that. Another question came in. I've been answering some, but while we're on that topic, question is, what about assumptions that are based on tables that may not live in NetSuite? For example, we have lease tables for rent payments that live in Excel. We have revenue inputs based on various inputs that come from a disparate system, so they also live in Excel.
Yep.
The answer to that is you can, of course, upload flat file data as well from Excel, right? It's by no means does it have to come through an automated integration. A lot of times what folks will do is have that Excel sheet live in the same place, right? And maybe you use SharePoint or you use some other kind of a file sharing service, right? And you can directly connect to that Excel sheet itself. Otherwise, you can also do flat file uploads of those sheets, if you will. I would also say though that one of the things that I've encountered that folks don't often think about is maybe you just migrate all of that data and the record keeping of that you're doing in Excel into a platform like Abacum, and you use Abacum itself to actually list out those tables. Now, maybe that's not feasible because you're comfortable with the process and you have it set up in such a way in Excel that you'd like, but ultimately, this is essentially a spreadsheet environment as well, like a Google Sheet kind of environment as well. You can migrate it to something in here and actually manage it inside of Abacum itself. Or you can do flat file uploads or connect to a live Excel sheet as it gets updated, it can refresh as well. I don't know, John, if there's anything you'd add to that, but that's been my experience with using Excel as a data source.
Yeah, that's exactly it. And that's really the beauty of Abacum is being able to go ahead. At the end of the day, we're source agnostic. So as long as you could point us in whatever direction, wherever the data resides, we can essentially pull that into Abacum and then you could utilize it, in those driver-based calculations. It could be used for planning, for reporting, for KPI tracking purposes. It's similar to like my example here where, so we have all different types of KPIs. And obviously there's a calculation that we've set up to create that logic. But best part is that you don't have to worry about updating it. Keep in mind, so once we go ahead and establish the integration as mentioned, all of your data updates based on whatever cadence you decide to set up. So for, a lot of customers, it's nightly, right? So therefore, when they log in the morning, they're looking at the most up-to-date and relevant information. It's almost as if they have a virtual cash register at the end of the day. Oh, all right. Any other questions, Jake?
Not so far. I mean, I answered some others. One of the questions was, how long does it take to build out a full model with all the spaces? How much of it was done by Abacum versus the customer? I said that this is a demo environment, right? So obviously this was built by Abacum, but a typical implementation takes 4 to 8 weeks from what I've seen. And when we're implementing, right, we want to work very closely with you. The idea is not in the beginning, you maybe show us your current model and then we go spend 8 weeks in a silo building it. The idea is that we build it together, right? There are parts that maybe we handle more on our side because they're more technical, things like although not really, maybe some of the integration aspects, but again, those are pretty simple to set up as well. But the idea is that we build the spaces, we're building the revenue modeling, the reporting, the expense modeling, all of that together, so that you're getting trained, right? And you're not having to go through some kind of a grand handoff at the very end. But of course, once we go live, there's always support, right? There's support from your implementation partner, there's support from Abacum human resources, Abacum documentation resources, right? So there's always help to be had. But in general, a good estimate for an implementation is about 4 to 8 weeks.
Yeah, that's exactly it. And when you think about it, that's rather quick time to value, and it's the fact that we've established these native integrations into some of the core ERPs that are out there. For a lot of for other CPM vendors, that's really a sticking point. It's difficult. In which case, I mentioned before, it can take an upwards of a week to go ahead and be able to pull in information. And from a time to value standpoint, you could go ahead and start leveraging Abacum out of the gate for reporting. So obviously building out your financial statements, balance sheet, P&L, cash flow. And then from there, you could take the phase approach and layer on the planning component, right? The modeling. And Jake and team take the train the trainer approach, as you mentioned. So the more time that you have to dedicate it, obviously, the better. At the end of the day, we want you to be self-sufficient, but they're always there to go ahead and lend a hand if required.
And I would just add to that. I mean, whenever we've done implementations, I find that some folks can feel a little bit overwhelmed by how much there can be to migrate out of Excel or a prior tool. But as John said, I think one of the fastest ways to feel the value of Abacum or any tool like that really is the reporting aspect. Is to get budgets and forecasts, potentially specifically budgets loaded into Abacum, get actual data flowing from the ERP, right? So you now have budget data and actual data, and then really get that reporting mechanism going. That can occur in like a week. You know what I mean? And so you're using maybe all of the sophisticated ARR modeling or SKU planning, whatever, is maybe the more complex part of your business. We do it in a secondary phase, so that we can kind of, bite it off slowly, and to make it a little more digestible. But the reporting aspect is definitely the fastest way to see kind of immediate value. Get that AI writing your variance commentary, get the dashboard set up, start distributing results to leaders. That's by far the fastest way to get some quick wins and value out of the system.
I think I actually missed one thing that I wanted to show now that you brought up the AI commentary thing real quickly here. We can dive into that. Yeah, the nice part being is that Jacob mentioned that's really sort of a time consume for a lot of organizations, and we've really eliminated that by being able to go ahead and generate summaries. So you'll notice that there's little pencil icons in all the charts. You could go ahead and click in on it and select quick summary. And then Abacum will actually go ahead and provide you a brief description as to what's going on within that data set. So it's very similar to, Chat GPT functionality where you're asking it questions. You could decide to make this longer, to shorten it up, whatever you like. You could come in, make edits to it, and then you could go ahead and post it. So once again, a really nice feature to have in terms of streamlining narrative reporting. Um, and this saves, a number of our customers a ton of time. And, you hit on this before, Jake. Really, the benefit is of being able to go ahead and close the books faster. It allows you to be proactive rather than reactive from a decision-making standpoint. And that's how you stay competitive these days, right? So if you're able to go ahead and play around with different levers on workday 1 or 2, that basically gives you so much of a head start in comparison to organizations that are wrapping up the books on workday, plus 15, for example.
Yeah, I mean, this is by far my favorite part. As I said earlier in the slides, I think that again, having come from FP&A and having spent an enormous amount of my life writing variance commentary and figuring out what customer or what product or what vendor or what location or whatever it may be drove the variances and why it happened. This is a major part. Of course, there may be some tweaking that needs to occur, but having something that writes out 80% drills into, especially if you're pulling in transaction level detail in NetSuite that has, dimensionality like product, like vendor, like customer, whatever it may be. All that information is available to the system, right? To actually look and see, all right, did we both budget on a by vendor level and did we forecast, excuse me, budget on a vendor level and have actuals come in on a vendor level? Maybe those vendors don't even, maybe it says Google AdWords in my budget and it says Google in my ERP. So there's some logic that needs to be added, right, to map those two together. Again, a highly manual process in the old days. But then actually drilling in and saying, hey, all right, these are the five vendors that caused the major variances. These are the products, right? Again, as long as that data is being pulled in, that underlying transaction detail, and we're also then budgeting at that same level, which is obviously very common, OpEx planning on a by vendor basis, revenue planning on a by product basis, et cetera. All that information is there, and ready to be used by the underlying AI to help write the commentary and tell the story, which is ultimately the most, in my opinion, the most important part of FP&A, which is really telling the story and letting leaders know what's going on.
That's exactly it. Becoming that better business partner.
Yep.
Amazing. Jake, I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing. I believe you have a wrap-up slide with our contact info as we're coming to the top of the hour here.
All right, can you all see this?
I think it's just about to pop up there. Perfect.
Yeah, here we go. So yeah, look, hopefully you all enjoyed the demo. You got a sense of how the system works. You got a sense of maybe how it can make your life a little bit easier, how easy it is to connect to NetSuite and other tools to bring data together to create relationships, logic, to tell the story, all the things that we have to do in the FP&A world. Um, Hopefully the demo showed you some of the capabilities. Of course, there's more to it. There's different features and functionalities that we could double click into and drill into that may be, specific use cases for you and your business. So if you have interest in seeing more or learning more or having another look at the tool, having a more personalized demo for your industry or your company, feel free to reach out to John, me, both of us, whoever you want, and we could get something set up. But yeah, I don't know, John, if there's anything you wanted to add, but that's kind of it.
No, that's spot on. I know, if you do have any additional questions, do not hesitate to reach out. As Jacob mentioned, you want to see something a little bit more detail, do not hesitate. We're here to support everybody.
All right. Well, I don't think we have any other questions. I'm answering the last question right now. Does Abacum have write back functionality to NetSuite? Correct me if I'm wrong, John, but I believe it does not. There is custom script. The integration itself is a push from NetSuite into Abacum. There is logic you could build that's custom to push data back from Abacum into NetSuite, but it is not standard. It's not a part of the core integration right now. But again, to be frank, that's kind of by design. I mean, Abacum itself is not meant to be, any of these tools are not meant to be your system of record. Of course, they're supposed to be accurate, right, and true, but by no means, should they be the ultimate source of truth itself, right? They sit on top of the sources of truth and they help to visualize the data, tell the story, build the forecast. But ultimately, we feel philosophically and believe that in finance the record of truth should be the NetSuites of the world. The Abacums should be the storytellers, and so there is no functionality to push data back. But again, if that is a need, there's always ways to move data around between systems, and custom scripting can be written to do that. But again, it is not a core part of the integration, and again by design, just to ensure that the system of record is maintained as such, and people can't accidentally go in and push data back into NetSuite that they didn't intend to do so.
Yeah, the auditors don't tend to like when you're pushing stuff back into
For
the
sure.
source of truth. Yeah. All right.
Okay. Any other questions? I don't see any in the chat. Looks like we've got everything answered. But like we said, if you have any other questions, want any other information, please feel free to reach out. And we're here to chat.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks,
Thanks, Jake.
y'all. Weekend. Yeah. Thanks, John. See you. Bye bye.